So for a multitude of reasons, in the society that we live in, every child goes through a process where their natural high self-esteem is replaced with a measurable ego. So when a child is very young, they don't actually have an ego. They're completely expressive, unfiltered, and they find it very easy to connect with others. They don't actually see themselves as lesser than or greater than others. They just are, and they would never even question their self-worth. All the self-worth they need comes just from being a human. In this perfect, untouched, ideal state, it's actually incredibly easy to connect with others, to make friends, and to find your tribe. They'll emit a clear, perfect signal with a perfect sample of their personality, making it super easy for those who are similar to them to connect with them, and for those who aren't similar to just reject them and move on. They also won't take rejection personally, as their sense of self-worth is not up for question. They have what we'd call high self-esteem. Now, as they grow older, they undergo a process where their natural self-esteem is worn down by society, parents, caregivers, peers, etc. And this is all done through a form of implicit social conditioning. The child's natural self-esteem is then replaced with a measurable construct called the ego. The default assumption of the ego is that you may not be enough just by existing as you are, as a human, and that the only way to really tell if you're enough or not is instead by external references. These references can include how many friends do you have, how many people like you, how big is your house, how big is your car, what's your salary, and this list goes on into eternity. People who are doing well on these metrics are able to come closer to their natural self-esteem, but bear in mind they were already born with. But people who see themselves as doing poorly on these metrics will find their self-esteem lower. So because now you have the subconscious assumption in your brain that you're not enough already as you are by being a human, you will compensate and you try and appear enough to others. You'll put on a front, you'll hide the traits you deem unacceptable, and you'll amplify the traits that you deem acceptable. And the ego becomes the effort to hold up that front. The bigger the front, the bigger the ego is. And the bigger a person's ego is, the more inferior they generally see themselves in their subconscious. Because this front is a defense, a form of reaction formation against people seeing the real you, if the front is exposed, you'll immediately become very emotionally vulnerable and naturally go into extreme defense mode. An example of this could be an extreme aggressive reaction to being cut off in traffic, or to an insult or a rude derogatory comment. The front that the person put on to convince themselves and others that they're an important person who should never be cut off in traffic, or never be insulted, or never be rejected, has been shown to be completely wrong, and their vulnerability has been exposed. And so of course they immediately go into emotional defense, either lashing out aggressively or doubling down to try and defend their front, just like a frightened animal. The problem with ego thinking is it also creates such a disconnect and a sense of competition with other people. Rather than realizing that all humans are 99.9% the same and we share the same genetic, ego encourages a sense of otherness. The idea almost like life is a zero-sum game with winners and losers, and that rather than other people being your friends or allies, they're instead competition at best and enemies at worst. This makes connection and vibing extremely difficult, as during an interaction with another person, you'll be constantly unconsciously analysing their status relative to yours and trying to create the right impression. This corrupts that signal with the sample of your personality that we spoke about earlier and sabotages the connection. For a final note, I want to mention that ego and social conditioning create the perfect consumer. Someone always slightly anxious of their status, protective of their territory, and eager to fit in by keeping up with Joneses. Unfortunately, this is capitalism at its finest. Whether you like it or not, we are enjoying some of the fruits of it, like the beautiful MacBook I'll be editing this video on. I'm not here to judge political or economic system, but it is important to understand the system you live within and how it works.